Hello and welcome to another Monday night Q&A. I'm pleased to say I'm joined this evening by my colleague Craig Cunningham from the Technical Services team. Good evening, Craig.
Evening, Sam.
How are you and how's your day been so far?
Yeah, it's been pretty steady. Been on the telephones today answering technical questions. It's been pretty good. I've been here for 7 years and really enjoying it.
Yeah, Craig's one of the Technical Services team who started not long after me, back in the days before the world went crazy with COVID, and we were both based in the Dunstable offices at the same time. So it's good to see him. So as with all our live Q&A sessions, I'll just run through some house rules. We'll start off by asking our question of the week that we posted across social media earlier today, and we'll go through our answer to that question. Then while you're putting your questions in the chat, we'll go through some of the answers from questions that we didn't get round to from previous Q&A sessions. What I would ask is that while you're putting in your questions in the chat, please remember there's no such thing as a stupid question, only stupid answers. But just as importantly, remember to be respectful to each other in the chat, as the whole idea of this evening is that collectively we'll help each other with the aim of improving our collective knowledge and understanding of all things associated with BS 7671 and the world of electrical installations. So earlier today we posted out a question. What does the acronym PMB, which is proposed in the DPC for BS 7671 Amendment 4, stand for? And the four options that we gave people were: is it A, passive neutral bonding? Is it B, phase neutral bonding? Is it C, protective neutral bonding? Or is it D, protective neutral breaker? And I'm glad to say that most people got the answers correct when I looked at it earlier on this afternoon. The answer is C, protective neutral bonding. And I've got to say, this isn't a previous question that we've had from weeks in the past. This one's deliberately put in to try and get people to have a look in the DPC for Amendment 4. So this is something that we did specifically to get people even more interested in the DPC and getting in there and having a look at what the proposals are, and then commenting on the ones that they believe are relevant. If we just have a quick look, we can see that there's a new definition proposed for Amendment 4 2026, where protective neutral bonding is an earthing arrangement found in a TNCS system where there's only one point in the network at which consumer installations are connected to a single source of voltage. In such a case, the supply neutral conductor connected to earth may be made at the consumer's installation or at another point near the source of the voltage. So as the definition says, similar to TNCS in that there's a combined protective and neutral conductor in the distribution element, but at some point there'll be a single connection to earth, which could be within the consumer's installation. The new proposals in Amendment 4 also, when it goes into Chapter 31, which talks about earthing arrangements, also give us some information that PMB may be adopted if the number of consumers is 4 or less, and their distance from the connection to earth is 40 metres or less, and it makes it clear that where the source earth is installed within the consumer's installation, PME conditions do not apply. So that makes it the difference. That's the clear difference, that it's not the PME version of TNCS that people are familiar with. It is a different earthing arrangement, and if you look in the draft for public consultation, the DPC, you'll see a couple of diagrams, one for single phase earthing arrangements, and a second one for 3-phase earthing arrangements. Anything you'd add to that, Craig?
Yeah, it's something that I've had a few times in the past, some questions we've had on the technical helpline. The difference between a PME is a protected multiple earth, and that has connections all along the route from the transformer to the premises, and it has multiple connections. Those are generally at a maximum of 40 metres between them, and that's why that 40 metres is referenced there. Also, for additional information, if anyone wants to go onto the Energy Networks Association and G12, I think it might be edition 4 now, or amendment 5, sorry, it gives good explanations in there about different earthing arrangements. So a really valuable document.
And that's a free download, isn't it?
It's a free download, yeah.
Oh, yeah, great stuff. So yeah, that's that question of the week really was our nudge, and we will continue to nudge people to get involved with the DPC for Amendment 4, because PMB has been around, and there are multiple PMB installations already in the UK. It's just that it was something which was not defined within BS 7671. So that's the proposal. It's that new definition, new recognition, and it's different. It makes it clear that it's different from PME, and therefore won't have those same requirements that PME does put on us.
Can I just add another point? The earthing and bonding arrangement within that installation can be smaller as well because of that requirement.
Absolutely, yeah. So we wouldn't have to do the things that we have to do over and above for PME. So yeah, it's really important in that it's clear that it makes that distinction in the Amendment 4 proposal. Okay, please do put your questions in the chat. Thank you very much for the engineers that are in there already. Darren Cranis, our colleague, has confirmed, Craig, it's G12/5. He also said that PNB was pink neutral bonding, but as it's, I think he's fighting a corner strongly, but I'm not sure that he's going to win that one. But thanks, Darren. Always good to see you. Okay, let's have a look at some of the questions that were hanging about. So a classic one that we get commonly into the technical helpline: what classification code would we give, would we attribute to a lighting circuit without a CPC? What's our thoughts there, Craig?
Generally, if all of the equipment is class 2, so all your lights and your switches are class 2 or insulated, then we can give that a C3. However, if we've got any class 1, it may have to be a more onerous code.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's all about, if we've got, we know that CPC would be there to provide earthing for, typically for ADS, but without that, providing we've got class 2 or insulated equipment, that's an alternative protective measure against electric shock. So yeah, if they are all, and we would, in a situation like that, we would recommend that warning labels be added to consumer units or distribution boards to make people aware that lack of CPC, and warn them against exchanging class 2 accessories for class 1. But yeah, the C3 is there to clearly show that it's non-compliant with 7671, which requires a CPC at each and every point. However, due to the nature of the installation, although it's non-compliant, it's not considered unsafe for continued use, providing that there are class 2 or insulated equipment.
Yeah, there is a reg that if anyone wants to refer to, the one that makes it non-compliant is 411.3.1.1. And also there is guidance in the best practice guide number 1. So there's a flow chart in there regarding CPCs without, lighting circuits without CPCs. and there's an example of a label in there as well.
Brilliant.
Referred to.
Okay, another one, please do, if you've got some questions, please do post them into the chat and we will pick them up. Another one that we've seen previously is, it's quite a long one, so excuse me while I do read it out. If a single circuit is made up of a number of different cable types and or conductor sizes, due for example to allow for volt drop or connection methods, should the distribution board schedule and schedule of test results record all of the cable types and sizes used in the circuit? So we quite often see this on larger installations, in particular where we might have a long distribution circuit. We might have different size cablings in particular to help us get over potential issues with volt drop. So where we've got effectively different types of cables, different sizes of conductors making up a single circuit, do we need to put those all on the schedule of test results? Well, you know, this is a sort of a commonsensical answer. The information should be recorded somewhere on the installation certificate, but not necessarily on the distribution board schedule and the schedule of test results, because there just isn't enough room. We know that we're very limited to room. But you should record it somewhere so that people, hopefully the next engineer who's doing some maintenance, doing some alterations and additions, doing some a periodic inspection of the installation, understands what was installed, so that they've got a record of what actually was installed. It should be recorded, but it doesn't necessarily have to be on that schedule of test results, purely because you know, we know that we're very limited in space there. So yeah, our answer is the information should be recorded somewhere. We know that we're very limited with space, so perhaps on the schedule of test results, in that comment box, use that to reference where the information for the full circuit is recorded. But yeah, it should be recorded somewhere. Would you add anything onto that one, Craig?
Only to say that, yeah, you can add additional pages to the end of your certificate to document and give examples. Another example, which is slightly different to this, and we reference it, and it's brought up sometimes on the helpline, a hybrid ring main or a lollipop where you've got two different cable sizes. That's really simple, and I always suggest to people that they create two lines, one for the 6mm, for example, and one for the ring main, the 2.5, with the same circuit number. But yeah, and again, normally the most onerous I would record if you've got multiple different sizes of cables.
Yeah. Okay. Another question. Can I install a single phase circuit and a three-phase circuit in the same multi-core cable? Again, a common question that we do get asked, again normally in larger installations. What's our thoughts there, Craig?
Yes, it is permitted, and there is, on regulation 528.1, it gives examples of what you need to comply with to meet that requirements, and also 521.7 refers as well. Yeah. So 521.7, we've thrown it up on the screen there. That clearly says, so there is a regulation that clearly defines that it can be done. There is a reference though that you have to meet the requirements of section 528, and section 528's got a number of requirements, most importantly around the fact that when you're dealing with different voltage bands, that the cables in a multi-core cable all have to be capable of, their insulation must be rated for the highest voltages available. So that's one real strong consideration. But generally, if that's done, then it's perfectly acceptable. So you need to comply with the requirements of section 528. But as Craig said, 521.7 nice and clear tells us that two or more circuits are allowed in the same cable.
Okay, another one that often comes into the helpline. In a wet room with a demountable shower head, what's the limit of zone 1? What's our thoughts there, Craig?
The limit on zone 1 is 1.2 metres from the fixed water outlet. So that is generally the fixed. If you've got a fixed head on the wall or a fixed head overhead, it's from that point onwards, and we don't need to extend it even if it's demountable. That's the point that we're looking at. So 1.2 in an arc from that position.
Yeah, and it's nice and clear. Some people sort of, when we're talking to them, say, well, what about if the user takes it off the wall? And you know, and that's one of those things that we can't stop people from doing. However, we don't have to factor for when we're looking at design. And I think if you look in the scope section of 7671, it does talk about, in section 701 in particular, it does talk about that it's for situations in its usable configuration. So you know, it's telling about its general use, how we design it and how we size it, and as Craig says, there's plenty of guidance about, which makes it clear that as shown in the diagrams and as referenced in section 701, even if the shower head is removable, then your zone 1 is still from the point at which it's fixed. So that's what we design against, and in particular, so in a wet room where we haven't got a basin, that shower zone 1 would be 1.2 from the location where the outlet is fixed, i.e. where it's mounted onto the wall or where it's fixed onto the wall. Okay, another common question that comes in is how high off the floor or above a worktop should a socket outlet be installed? Again, another question, and this one, there isn't actually a defined answer within 7671 in terms of a measurement. So there is no specific height in 7671, but one of the regulations 553.1.6 does state that a socket outlet on a wall or a similar structure shall be mounted at a height above the floor of any working surface to minimise the risk of mechanical damage to the socket outlet or to an associated plug and its flexible cable, which might be caused during insertion, use or withdrawal of the plug. So it gives us some clear guidance. We've got guidance in the Pocket Guide app, which says that we recommend a height of at least 100 millimeters from the bottom of the socket to either the worktop or the finished floor, but also consider what the socket will be used for, in particular what type of plug is going to be used in it, who's going to be using it, etc. So yeah, no specific dimension given in 7671, but it clearly has to be done so that the distance won't affect the safe operation of the socket outlet with its associated plug, and we would recommend 100 mil. Anything you'd add to that, Craig?
No, I think you've covered it. Only to say it's in Pocket Guide 5. So if all of the guys have got the Pocket Guide app on their phone, reference Pocket Guide 5, and it's clearly marked in there.
Okay, we've got a few questions that have come into the chat that we'll try and take. One I saw and it's disappeared, so if the engineer did put it in, please put it back in so that I can see it again. But the wording was something along the lines of, can unistrut be used as containment for cabling? And I think it might have even been for cabling for safety circuits. My thoughts there is that unistrut isn't, it obviously isn't fully enclosed, and it's not designed for for cable support. It would be very unclear that it would give the required degree of protection, because it would be no similar to something like tray, and depending upon the type of cable and the environment it's being installed in, it might not be deemed as sufficient protection for the cable in that environment. So I think you'd have to look at where it was. There wouldn't be there's nothing that says definition wise it is or isn't, but you would need to look at in particular in the application, what kind of potential damage, mechanical impact, etc. Could occur to those cables in the environment that it's in. Now, if it's in a location where it's not, then it may be that it's deemed adequate. But yeah, difficult one to give a definitive for, would you say, Craig?
It is so funny, because I had a similar phone call on the helpline today, and I referenced BS5839 Part 1, and in there, in the clauses 26.1 and 26.2, it does mention containment of cables. And again, exactly as you've said, depending on where that is, it may be deemed suitable. So, for example, in a shop above a ceiling where there is no likelihood of impact, etc., and the cable and the fire rating of the ceiling, for example, may be suitable, then it may be deemed suitable. But that's where I would reference anyone for that, BS 5829 Part 1 and Clause 26.1 and 2.
Yeah, and it would be all about, is the cable provided with adequate protection for the environment it's installed in, and it's going back to one of our fundamental principles that talks about, everything should be suitable for the installation in which it's installed in, or the way we're installing it is going to make it suitable for that installation. So yeah, as Craig said, if it's not likely to be impacted from above, then you may be able to provide some form of containment that doesn't have a covering above the cable. So yeah, it would be one of those questions that is possible. There's nothing that explicitly rules it out from being used as containment, but it would need to be suitable for the environment in which it's installed in.
Yeah.
One of the other questions which again seems to have disappeared is was talking about the fact that PNB seems to be catering for something that would really be an issue associated with DNOs. Well, I guess the thing that I'd comment on there is that ultimately the earthing arrangement is provided by the DNO in this instance, because they're saying that it's got a combined protective and neutral conductor, but it's allowing us to create a PNB earthing arrangement which doesn't have the same slightly onerous requirements as PME does. So although it is it's connected with DNO, I wouldn't suggest that it's an issue of DNO. We know that just historically through time, we started off with TT, then we went to TNS when they provided us with an earth, and then they realised that they could actually go from 3 conductors to 2 and give us a combined neutral and earth. So it's something that we know is around, but it's just a different form of TNCS, not PME, and therefore might give us some advantages over PME in those installations. We've got another one. Is it acceptable to notch the bottom of a joist and fit a metal protective plate? Yeah, there's nothing that says you can't notch either top or bottom, so long as you still fall within the dimensional requirements for the notches, such that you're not going to cause any deterioration in the structural integrity of the notches. There's nothing that says we can only notch the top. So yeah, there's no issues with the bottom. You might find issues with other trades and things afterwards, you know, if they're going to be, if it's the bottom that they're going to be fitting their ceiling onto. But as far as 7671 is concerned, and protection of the cable and maintaining of the structural integrity, so that you meet the requirements, for example, of Part A of the building regs, there's nothing to suggest that you can't notch the bottom. Anything you'd add to that, Craig?
Yeah, I think I'd refer to regulation 522.6.201 and also 522.6.204, which is about impact of cables and where they're run above ceilings and below floors. So those, I would refer to the 201, 522.6.201 first, and if they can't achieve that, the first part, then they may have to comply with 522.6.204, which is mechanical protection, like you said.
Yeah. So are you thinking there about the 50 mil from the surface?
Yeah, because if they're notching a joist, not normally when people go through joists, it's kind of in the centre, so we're well above the 50 and below the ceiling or below the floor. So yeah, if it's notched lower and it's 50 mil, I think we'd have to comply with 522.6.204. There is a pocket guide as well that references that as well. I can't remember off the top of my head what it is.
Yeah, so no, it's a really good point that you would still have to meet those requirements. But yeah, I think there's nothing explicitly that prohibits you from notching the bottom, but you still need to meet the other requirements of 7671. Okay, one of the engineers has commented that the 100 mil from the socket and worktop would also be dependent on if an upstand was fitted. The height would need to be increased if an upstand was fitted. So yeah, this is when we talked about that, you know, in general we recommend 100 mil, but you do need to consider what's the socket outlet going to be used for, what style of plug, who's going to use it, etc. So yeah, I think you know, we all go and can remember back to the days when people were putting socket outlets on skirting board and it was extremely low and just about unusable. So yeah, that's where that 100 mil has come to take us above. Okay. I think the same engineers and shouldn't life safety systems, fire alarms have separate containment, not using a system designed for bracketry? So I think this might be thanks to the engineer that asked the question about using Unistrut for containment. One of the things is that if you do have containment with both safety services and non-safety services, then they should be segregated and labelled accordingly, so that people know that you're not going to, you know, when you're installing, you're not going to damage the safety services by installing a non-safety related cable into that common trunking. So they should be partitioned.
Yeah.
Okay. So just looking through, even guys, share that. So I think now one of the engineers commented that the diagram that we showed in section 701 for the bathroom is the drain outlet, not the shower outlet. Now it is that, again, that's a common misconception. When they talk about the water outlet, they don't mean where the water's going to, they mean where the water's coming from. So the water outlet is the shower outlet, not the drain on those diagrams. Okay, again, another common one. How should SY or YY cable be coded in an EICR for power circuits? I think in general the comment around this is the fact that what we need to consider is that sometimes when something isn't compliant with 7671, it doesn't necessarily make it unsafe. And when we're looking at an EICR, we're really looking for, is it safe for continued use first, and is it compliant? So there may be issues where it's not compliant if the SY or YY cable doesn't have a British standard, then that would make it non-compliant. But depending upon the environment in which it's installed, it may still be considered safe, in particular because it's got the required degree of protection, and the sheath and insulation is adequate for both the installation and for the circuit that it's being used for. So there's no blanket coding, but typically you may be considering a C3 if it's suitable for the environment it's being installed in, but just non-compliant with 7671 because it doesn't meet a British standard. Anything you'd add to that, Craig?
Yeah, no, I agree with that completely. The only thing, that was from an EICR point of view. If it was from a initial verification point of view, then I'd be referring to regulation 133.1.1 and 133.1.3. That refers to selection of equipment. So it normally says about British or European standards, etc. Yeah. If it falls outside of that, then the designer, the person who's installing it, has to provide information on their certificate that is suitable. So it may be classed as a departure, if you like.
Yeah, no, spot on. It's very different whether we're looking at this from an EICR or from a design and installation certificate following verification. And I think the engineer who posted the question was looking at it from an EICR point of view. But yeah, it's a great point to make that it's it's non-compliant and therefore shouldn't be installed. So you wouldn't be able to provide your installation certificate because it would be seen as a departure, which you personally as an installer would be very difficult to verify that it's no less safe than if you had complied by using a cable with the required standard.
And we wouldn't recommend it.
No. Okay, how can I record a nominal voltage of 480 volts on an NIC EIC? I'm thinking perhaps the engineer is referring to is there a limit on the drop down? I'd need to go and check myself, to be honest. You certainly should be able to record it, although it'd be considered a non-standard. We're normally thinking of 400 or 240, but you might have a two-phase system where you're getting a 480 voltage. So you certainly should be able to. I think the engineer has replied it's 460 max. So is that a limit within the certification software? I'd have to have a look, to be honest. I don't know if you're aware of that, Craig. We don't get too heavily involved in the certification side.
Yeah, it would be something I would put through to them to ask, because sometimes there are limits and there's not always free text, so you can't always put something in.
Yeah, no, the engineer, in fact, thank you, has come back and said, yeah, it only allows 460 and 230. So yeah, that's something that we'll feed back into the online certification team. But yeah, it would be. But it'd be also interesting to know why it's 480, because as I sort of said, that would be deemed as not a standard for a single phase or three phase, but perhaps you've got something different. So a question that's come in from an engineer. I've heard a subcontractor of mine saying that an EV car charger is a piece of equipment installed in a special location, but I can't find evidence of this and should always have a full EIC and never a minor works. Apparently it came from advice from his NIC assessor. So yeah, if it's a new circuit, which that EV charging equipment generally is, then a new circuit, it would need to be a full installation certificate. Yeah, not really sure where that advice is coming from, and and can't imagine where it'd be an addition or an alteration to an existing circuit, because it has to have the vehicle charging socket outlet has to have its own dedicated RCD generally, although we can have separation, and it also has to have an overcurrent protective device. So yeah, I can't think off the top of my head of an instance where it would be an addition or an alteration to an existing circuit, and therefore you could use a minor works. So yeah, I think well, definitely, if it's a new circuit, that has to be a full installation certificate, not a minor works. Would you add anything to that one, Craig? Strange one.
No, I would agree with you exactly. The RCD obviously has to disconnect both line and neutral. So again, unless they're referring to an old circuit that was redundant to an outbuilding or something, and they were adding or altering to that. But in general terms, I would agree with you. Normally, it's a new circuit from the origin or from the distribution board.
Yeah, and the engineer has come back to say that yeah, it's a split phase system. 480 volts is yeah, 180 degree two phase 3-wire system. So yeah, I think long time ago, yeah, something that reminds me about on a farm with some particular dairy equipment was based on that. So yeah, but that's too long ago, if I'm honest. And we've got a question that has also come in, so I'm just going to ask this one before we go to the final ones from the field. So on an EICR, what code should no AFDDs for a care home installation be? What's our thoughts on that one, Craig?
Generally, it would be a C3 because it would be required if you're installing now, but not necessarily required at the time of install. So a C3, it's non-compliant with the current edition of the regulations.
Yeah. And we should have mentioned it before when we referred to the recommended classification code for a lighting circuit without CPC. We always suggest Best Practice Guide 4. It's published by Electrical Safety First, but it is produced and agreed by an industry standard group, ourselves included, colleagues from ECA, Electrical Safety First, NAPIT, the IET, BEMA. So it really is recognised industry guidance, and that also recommends a C3. It's also worth saying that because the question talked about a lack of AFDDs in a care home installation, remembering that it's only a requirement of 7671 for them to be installed on the single phase socket outlet circuits rated up to 32 amps, not all circuits within a care home. So it wouldn't be something that's a C3 across the board, because other than those final circuits supplying socket outlets rated at less than 32 amps, it's not a 7671 requirement. And just as a follow-up to that, there's a question: EV socket outlets in HMOs, HRRBs, care homes and student built accommodation, do they require AFDDs? No, not outside. So that wasn't the intention of that reg 421.1.7, and I can't think off the top of my head now, but there was either some further guidance in one of the RAG questions or some BEMA guidance around that it was 421.1.7 was 421.1.7 is specifically for protection for the socket outlets within the building, and it was deemed that it wasn't a requirement for those socket outlets such as EV socket outlets, which would be outside of the building. But I will do some digging to find out where that's documented, but I seem to remember that as being a stated requirement. Okay, somebody has entered some, and a very large amount of text, but I'm not going to go through that right now, but I will go through it in terms of a question perhaps for next time. But before, once again, thank you very much to everybody that's contributed tonight, in particular those that have helped each other out and ourselves out within the chat. It's always great to see, and the whole idea of these first Monday nights of the month is to make sure that we are trying to help each other out, and the overall improvement of 7671. Just before we go, want to make you aware of our Wire webinar series. We're just finishing off our summer break, and very soon we'll be posting all of the information to enable you to register for our series, which will run from September to the end of year. Wires that we have got planned are the first one in the middle of September is based around the draft for public comment for Amendment 4. We're also going to do a webinar later on in the year around BS 7671. We get lots of questions about how is it produced, why is there an amendment, what's the difference between an amendment and a corrigendum. So we're going to do a session with some of our colleagues from the IET just all around BS 7671, how it's produced, and how changes are made, where they come from, and what's the relationship between 7671 and the international standards and European standards. We've got something around MCS assessments, because that's now a growing part of our industry, that's sort of running along in parallel with the electrotechnical side, and an update around battery storage. There's been a lot of technology changes, and most recently a PAS, a publicly available standard, has been published, which we're going to talk through as well. So keep an eye on the NIC website and our social media channels, because you'll be able to register for those webinars in the very near future. Please do stay in touch with us across the social media channels. We've got platforms monitoring right the way across Facebook, X, or Twitter as it was, Instagram, LinkedIn, and our Instagram channels. And please do, if you've got some questions that we didn't answer tonight, or you didn't get time to put them in, please do post them in, and we'll pick them up next time when we'll be running another Monday night Q&A. So we do aim to run them on the first Monday of every month. So next one will be Monday the 7th of October, and like I say, if we didn't get round to your question tonight, then we'll do our best to answer it then. If you didn't get time to put your question in, then please do post it into us, and we'll try and get round to it next time. Any final thoughts from yourself, Craig?
No, just that I really enjoyed it. Hoped it's helped some people, and yeah, just keep watching, keep learning.
Yeah, no, it's brilliant. There was some great questions in, and some great comments in the chat as well, and it's great to see other people helping each other out. If what we always say, if anybody tells you they know it all, then they don't. It's quite clear. No, this industry's too big, too wide for anybody to know it all. So yeah, let's help each other out when we can. Brilliant. Okay, thanks very much, Craig, and thanks to everybody. Thanks very much for your contributions. As Craig spot on said, hope it's helped people, and hopefully see you again in May, on Monday in October. Thank you very much.
Cheers all.